Um, so I was wondering if you would indulge me for a moment here. Every time I give a talk like this, I like to take a video or a photo of the crowd. There's too many of you, so I can't like squeeze you all into a photo. So what I need to do is I need to take a video. So if everybody, I'm just going to pan across. So if everybody could just like, I don't know, cheer for lunch or sandwiches or something like that. Or for me, or do, or whatever, that would be fantastic. So, what's that? We want Chris, we chanted. Celebrate however you feel is the best way to celebrate. Be respectful of your neighbors, but maybe throw your arms up in the air and give me a woo, okay? So I'm recording now. I'm panning. Woo! Time up. Okay, good. Good. Thanks, guys. Yeah, we'll do a before and after, and we'll do sad faces after I'm done speaking. Oh. My name's Frank. I'm a designer and an illustrator. And the newest role that I've sort of taken up is apparently an author or a writer. I started writing a book a few months ago, and I was talking to my friend Laura in the pub a couple nights. The first night we were up here, and I was just talking about how difficult this book has been for me to write. I mean, it's the first thing that I've ever written at this length, but it was just a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, and I sort of realized that I was making it difficult for myself. And I'm trying to find a way to sort of make that into a good thing and sort of, instead of a thing to be down about. And she told me the story about, she was watching this television show called Chimero, and there was a chef doing a cameo on the show. His name was David Chang, and he's the head chef at a restaurant in New York called Momofuku. And he's talking to a sous chef, and basically the sous chef tries to cut a corner. And what he says is, we don't work like that here. We do things the long, hard, stupid way. So in the kitchen, that means that they don't use yesterday's bread. It means that they make their own broth. They just do everything themselves. And I sort of thought about it and realized that that one quote was sort of my gateway to take some pleasure in how difficult making this book was going to be. And I started realizing that I have a tendency to want to do things the long, hard, stupid way. So I'm an illustrator and a designer, but I don't actually have any slides. So this is like part of me doing things the long, hard, stupid way. Just trying to get up here and to tell you guys some stories. And what's really interesting is when you look at doing things the long, hard, stupid way, it's sort of a spectrum. And it's like, there's the way that I do it that's very painful and difficult, but ultimately the way that I feel compelled to make things. And then there's like optimum efficiency over here. And I think what's interesting is to sort of look at that gap and to analyze it. And I think that from the perspective of someone who makes things, and I bet that a lot of people out there are also folks who make things in some capacity. When you work the long, hard, stupid way, it looks a lot like toiling and worrying and starting over and scratching good ideas to look for better ones. It's staying up late, it's waking up early, it's all of those sort of romanticized things. And all of those actions are inspired by just caring a lot. And that's not to say that you can't be efficient and care about your work. I think that's totally possible, but I don't know how to do that because I have to do things the long, hard, stupid way. So that's what it looks like from the perspective of someone who makes things. From the perspective of someone who enjoys the things that others make, I think that that extra labor is more of a gift. It's the extra essence behind it. It's a carefully prepared dish. It's a well-phrased paragraph or a beautiful story inside of a book. It's the grooves of whittling if you're hand whittling a walking stick. So I think that this seems to be a place that sort of embraces the long, hard, stupid way. So I thought that I would talk about the idea of gift giving and the gift of working in this fashion. I think that when we work this way, what we produce sort of gains an ephemeral quality around it. It's sort of in the air. And there's a story about an 18th century Japanese student that I think really nicely describes that. He's extremely poor, so every night for dinner he has to eat rice. And he's staying at an inn, and one night he gets the great idea that he'll have his usual dinner of rice, but he'll sit underneath the window outside of the kitchen, and while the innkeeper is making his fish, he'll smell the fish while he's eating his rice, and the smell of that fish will make his meal more enjoyable. And I love this idea because this is how it feels to enjoy the work of other people. They're making their fish, and their efforts sort of improve the ambient space around the work. And for me, to be able to read a beautiful book while I'm trying to write a book, like if I read F. Scott Fitzgerald, it's like I'm smelling his fish while I'm trying to eat my rice, you know? Well, it turns out that the story goes on, and the student does this for a few nights, and he gets found out, and the innkeeper's just furious about this. He says, "You're stealing my fish from me." So he grabs the kid by the arm and drags him in front of the magistrate. And with the magistrate, it's up to him to decide whether or not the student needs to pay the innkeeper for the stolen smell of the fish. And the student has no money again, barely enough to pay for his rice, and never mind the fish. So the magistrate hears the case, and the only hope that the student has is that this guy has been known to make interesting rulings in the past. And he listens to the case, and he looks at the student, and he says, "How much money do you have?" And the student's worried at this point. He thinks that he's going to lose all of his money. And he pulls out the coins in one hand, and he says, "I only have a few coins, but it's not enough to pay for the fish. And if I have to pay him, I'll go hungry." So the magistrate thinks for a moment, and he says, "Okay, do exactly as I say." And the student complies. And the magistrate says, "Take the coins that you have in one hand and pour them into the other hand." And he does so. And then there's a pause, there's like a beat, and then the magistrate says, "Okay, the case is dismissed, it's settled." And the innkeeper, upon hearing this, thinks for a moment, and then he becomes furious. Like, how can this ever be settled? Nothing just happened. And in one of those brilliant moments where you say the right thing at exactly the right time, that always happens in these sorts of stories, the magistrate says, "It has been settled because the smell of your fish has been paid by the sound of his money." The beautiful thing about that is it's to say that whenever we make things, either for ourselves or for other people, there's a value in that lives completely outside of commerce. There's sort of side benefits. And I love the idea that for me as a person who makes things, there can be these side benefits to the work that I produce. And the best way to sort of think about those side benefits, because they're not wrapped up necessarily in commerce and dollars and cents, is to think of them as a gift. And there's another bit about gifts from a television show called The West Wing. I'm sure a few of you are familiar with it. It's about, okay, great, woo! Okay. So if I totally destroy this story, I'm so sorry if you're a big fan. But there's an episode where President Bartlett asks his aide Charlie to go find a carving knife for him for Christmas dinner. And Charlie goes out into the city, and he finds a pretty good knife, and he brings it back to the president. And he says, "Here, this knife's pretty great. What do you think?" And the president dismisses it. He says, "No, I don't, this is not good enough. Go out and find me another knife." So Charlie goes out and he does a little bit of research this time. And he comes back with another knife and he says, "I've done some research. This one is fine. It's highly recommended from other people. What do you think, Mr. President?" And President Bartlett again rejects this knife. So essentially he sends Charlie back out on this quest to find a fine carving knife. And he does the work, he does the research, he looks at a lot of knives himself, and he comes back with what he believes to be the finest carving knife that he can find on the whole eastern seaboard. And he brings it before the president, and he describes all the finer details of it. He talks about how the blade actually goes back into the handle. He talks about the sharp tip and the honed blade and how it's made by hand and how the weight distribution of the blade feels excellent in your hand. And he puts it before the president, and President Bartlett says, "Even this won't do. This isn't the knife that I want." And with that, the president reaches into a drawer on the side of his desk, and he pulls out a knife of his own, and he sets it on the desk. And he says, "Charlie, I've got this knife, and I want you to have it." And he explains that the knife inside of the box is a family heirloom that's been passed down for 6 generations. He tells the story of this knife, and he says that it was made back in, I suppose, the 18th century by a certain blacksmith in Boston named Paul Revere. And he gives it to Charlie, and it's sort of a great story because it describes so much of the qualities and patterns of what it is to give a gift. The first one's like really, really obvious. It has to be given to you. You can't ask for a gift. I feel like sometimes we do buy things and there's a gift in there, but it's because we paid a certain amount, but what we got back was larger than what we paid. It's that gap between the two that becomes the gift. The second is gifts have a tendency to go to the empty space. And what that means is that in the context of the knife story, President Bartlett gave that knife to Charlie because he didn't have a son himself to give it to. Conversely, another detail is Charlie never knew his father, and his mother had just passed away. So that knife became a symbol to represent their relationship and the bond that they had formed over the past few years. The last one is that the more a gift moves, the more value it gains. So because that was a family heirloom, think about the heirlooms you have in your own family. The more generations it's been passed down, maybe it's a profession like being a baker, the more generations that passes down, the more value it has and the more meaning it has to you. And I thought it would be really interesting to do something like that here at Do. So I thought it would be great if something was passed around the camp. So I brought a knife with me, and I just gave it to, no, I didn't bring a knife. I actually brought a stone with me, and when I showed up on Wednesday, I gave it to my friend John, who works for Do. And I said, John, it's so great to see you. It's been a few months. Here, have a rock. And he gave me this look like, what is this rock for? Like, what are you doing here? And I explained, like, oh, it's for my talk, and then that made him understand a little bit. And he said, I'm talking about gift giving, and you know, I just thought it would be great if we could have this rock that we pass around the camp, and the only rule of it is that you need to give it to someone else, and there needs to be a reason that you give it to someone else. So for me, giving it to John, it's to say, nice to see you after all these months. Maybe he makes a decision to give it to someone else after that to say thank you for someone. So who has the rock now? I can't really see right now. Has it gone missing? Someone has it? It's someone outside the tent. Okay, so the rock has moved beyond recognition, I suppose. So much for the idea of putting it in the auction. Maybe we'll find it later. But the idea is that how many people in here had the rock at some point? Okay, so it looks like maybe 5 or 6 people. So not very valuable. I guess it's a rock. The idea, though, is that through movement, you can take, and customization and personalization, and the lens of a gift, you can take something that's not very valuable and make it valuable. And I think about my experiences in the past where this was true, and I think about being given mixtapes by friends. None of us had like the double-deck cassette tape, so we would have to listen to the radio for the song we wanted, and then hit record just in time, and if we kind of were off a little bit, it just ruined the whole thing. A cassette tape itself is not meaningful, but it's the structure and the thoughtfulness around that mixtape and the sacrifice that an individual has to make to do it that makes it valuable. It's that friction that makes it that way. And I think about the work that I do as a designer. It's my job to make things for other people. I get hired by somebody to make something, and then that gets given to someone else. There's 3 steps there already. And then if I do my job and people love that, they share it with someone else. So there's potentially more steps after that. So how can I think about my job as anything other than giving a gift? Essentially, the best work that I do is when I say something I really believe to people that I care about. And those are the times when the work is the best, and the times that it's not like that, I feel awful inside because I'm not making mixtapes for people. My work so often as a designer that has eaten away at me has been to realize that my role is frequently to generate desire in other people and to make them want. And the reason that I'm so prone to want to look at the work that I do from now on as a gift is because a gift offers the promise of satiating that desire in some way. So maybe if I can short-circuit the system somehow, design is just a skill, and we all get the benefit to choose how we use our skills. So maybe instead of using it to make people want things, I can use the same skills to give them things that satiate those same desires. The space that I'm working more and more frequently is the digital space. And I've been thinking a lot about how one gives a gift whenever they're in the digital space. We kind of understand how gifts work in real space. So if we typically have goods and services and then information. Like this is the stuff that makes up what we share with one another. And if I have a real photo and I give it to someone else, let's say it's a photo of my grandfather before he set off to go to war. If my grandmother gives me that photo, she no longer has it, right? If I do someone a service, like let's say I help a friend move. It's the inconvenience and the time investment of that becomes the cost. There's always a sacrifice when you give a gift, and it's the bigger the sacrifice, the more the gift is worth. That's why we say the ultimate gift is sacrificing your life for someone. There's a third classification of information, And that's sort of where digital lives, because when something's digital, it turns into information. It's all bits and bytes and ones and zeros and all of that. And the thing about information is it sort of has like an infinite multiplicity to it, right? So if I email someone a photo, I don't lose it. I still have it. And that lowers the cost of a gift. So digital makes us more prone to share things, but it also reduces our capacity to give things. So this is where I'm at, and I'm trying to figure out how to curtail this a little bit with the digital space. The best example that I've seen is from my friend Amit. And what he did was, on accident, he realized that he had some friends that had never seen his handwriting. So he wrote an iPad application so he could write little note cards to friends. And it looks like an old postcard. And it's just a very simple thing that he made in a weekend for himself. And he sent it to a few friends. And those friends responded really positively to it. They just loved it. And they said, how can we use this? And he never really thought about how he would distribute it to just a few friends. And it turns out the easiest way to do that is not to just give it to them, but rather to make it available to everybody inside of the app store that Apple set up. So he did that, and he just copied the address and sent it to a few friends, and he never did any promotion, just sort of saying, this is the path of least resistance to give this to my friends. So he put it up there for free. Turns out that Apple caught wind of it and featured it in the store. So a few days later, thousands of people have downloaded this app. And he made a decision about how people would give feedback about it that isn't really wise. In fact, it might be the long, hard, stupid way of doing it. He said that if you have any thoughts about the application, any feature requests or any bugs, use it to write me a note and send me that note. So he's in a situation now where he's made a free app in a weekend that thousands of people are using, and he has thousands of messages in his inbox, all handwritten, asking to put in features into the software, reporting bugs about things that don't work quite right. But the most common thing is people say, I can't believe you're giving this to me. And people are using it, and I'm looking at this realizing that this is the potential of giving a digital gift. It's that you can build a platform and a framework for people. You can build a machine that turns into a gift-giving machine. And I love that, because what it does is it turns a computer network into a human network. And it uses gift giving as sort of a conduit to make people snap back into focus in a digital sense. And this is sort of the thing that I'm going to choose to tackle once the book is finished. Because I believe in making things for other people. Because I think it's by making things for other people that it highlights our codependency, and by considering audience, it has the edges of our beings move further out. And we gain more overlap in the process of doing that. And I think my big do is this. It's to look at those overlaps, to talk about the things that we have in common, to create situations that allow us to have more in common, and to really analyze those, to make things for other people. And by doing so, to sort of somehow harness the auspicious wonder that I think lies at the heart of making. And if you listen to all the other talks, you're hearing the same thing over and over in a bunch of different ways. And when you listen to it, I've kind of synthesized it a bit like this. Everyone's saying, stop and look around you. They're saying everything is possible again, and the world isn't yet done. And I think that what we can do is, if we start making things for one another and start thinking of them as gifts, we can give that to each other. Thank you.